Hi, I'm Gwen Floyd, and thank you for joining me for my final presentation for our class. My presentation was on communication theory, specifically change within a healthcare system. So I love Dilbert, but I'm very happy to share that I do not have a boss like his, thankfully. But I've come to realize that organizations don't frequently stop to consider how the strategic changes they make can impact every employee within the organization. Now, is it realistic or fair even to expect that the CEO understands the overall impacts? No, of course not. But I do believe it's realistic to expect your leader to consider how the information is disseminated to all employees. Strategic changes should rely on strategic communication to share that information. And I believe the being transparent, sharing detailed information, and utilizing messengers who do understand the impact to their employees can go a long way in creating more accepting and engaged workforces. So let's understand the problem. I've got a company with well over 19,000 employees, and they have to find an appropriate way to share a system-wide organizational structure change. This is going to affect a lot of people. Some it'll affect directly and others more indirectly. And the reaction to this news could have its own impact on company culture. So we need to understand what is the best plan for sharing the information. So my thesis, when sharing information regarding widespread organizational changes, a company should consider which form of communication will be most effective by understanding the impact to their workforce. So now that we understand the problem, let's talk about communication theory, or more specifically, the theories I believe will be at play when sharing communication about organizational change. First is symbolic interaction theory. And this theory believes that society uses symbols to help establish meaning within communication with others. It helps to describe the relationship between the person receiving a message or communicating with somebody else. You can see here, for example, a boss to an employee. The employee knows who that person is, and they see that person as the boss, and that makes them have certain feelings about them. It develops a view of that person being the person who maybe signs their paycheck. And it affects the way they may communicate with that individual. The same can be true CEO, service line VP, director, manager. Understanding where you fall in that line and what your symbolism is. Are you a subordinate to your manager? It makes a difference in what your interaction may be with that person. There's also another side to this when you think of the system culture, and that is understanding how you see that person, but perhaps in your culture, somebody else has a very negative idea of that CEO. And you work with that person daily, you have a good relationship with that person, they do the same job that you do, it's a coworker, so you start to see the same thing. So it could be, though, you see that person's been supportive of you, it's a great feeling, but then that person with you has not had that same experience. So symbolic interaction theory can also be quite affected by system culture, I believe, as well. Organizational culture theory is next, and that's understanding our company culture. Let's understand that a little bit, because understanding that can be the difference between negative and positive responses to our message and information that we share. As it states here, behaviors can be amplified in your employees by just the behaviors of your leaders. So we want to understand how those relationships work, and we want to understand the culture within our system of the effect of those relationships. Cognitive dissonance theory. Dissonance, it exists in both our work and our personal lives. We feel it when we experience feelings of inconsistency and unease. And, we have to understand that some employees may have feelings that it can disconnect them. They're very discontent, and they feel ill at ease when receiving our message. And we need to understand why. We want to do the work we need to reduce dissonance. And once again, our message needs to be clear and transparent, but we should consider both the format and the messenger and how that may help our employees feel less uneasy about changes. For example, if you don't know the CEO, that message really coming from her may not mean as much as it would coming from your direct supervisor. So we want to consider things like that. Organizational information theory. This really focuses a lot more on the actual information, the message, and it focuses on the organization of it, making sure that you understand how you're putting it in place in the best possible way to get your message out. So organizing the message may be making sure that you're stating why. Why are we doing this? When are we doing this? What will be the impact to this person and to this person by doing this? Organize your message and how you want to share the information. Sharing the actual message, how? Are you going to do it in an email? Are you going to do it during a podcast? Are you going to do it during an in-person meeting? Who? Know who those people are. There are going to be some key people who are going to be impacted the most. Are you going to meet with them? How will you share that with those particular people? And make sure you're meeting with them in that order that they need to. Who needs to know first? And lastly, when? There's got to be a time frame for getting all this information out, because once you start to share, more people are going to share. That's something to always consider. So my solution to this problem, I think the president should meet in person with the stakeholders, and that would be the service line VPs and the chief medical officers. The service line VPs are taking over. They are now going to be at the top of that organizational chart. And then I think the president needs to meet in person with the employees most directly impacted. In this case, our medical group VPs and our director of operations. The medical group is kind of going away. And so those VPs are looking at position eliminations. And the directors of operations who report up to those VPs are now going to report up to service line VPs. So those conversations have to happen pretty quickly. And those conversations have to be detailed, and they have to be able to ask questions and have an understanding of what the next steps are. And so that's so far our order of how I think this communication should be made. Once those main people are spoken with, and you've had those meetings, then I think you move on to the system as a whole. I think the president shares one broad message, and I think she would do that during a weekly all-staff video conference that she does. And I think that should be followed by a system-wide email. I think that the service line VPs and directors of operations at that point should already be prepared and have meetings scheduled with what will be now their direct reports. And the service line VPs would meet in person with providers who would now report up through their service line specialty. So for example, if you have an orthopedic service line, orthopedic physicians would meet with that service line VP. And for your directors of operations, those practice managers have already been reporting to those directors, but they may have questions on how this is affecting the directors, what it's going to look like moving forward. So the directors of operations have to have those conversations. Lastly, the providers and managers in those practices can meet in an all-staff meeting and discuss the changes with the support staff. The support staff are not going to be as impacted as managers, directors of operations, etc., but it will be a change and they need to understand it. I think in-person meetings are important, and I think by doing it in this regard, you're having the people who have worked closely with these particular employees in the past sharing the message and doing it in a way that hopefully it will bring about positive responses and a feeling that things will be okay, because these people are still here and we're all kind of going through it together. So that's my solution. I have to say that I've really enjoyed this course and understanding the theories. It's opened my eyes a bit under reading the scenarios and a little bit more. And I've recognized some of the scenarios I've watched play out at work. And using this problem was my way of coming up with a solution of how this particular situation could have been handled better in my company. And I appreciate what I've learned here to be able to come to those conclusions. So I thank you. I welcome any feedback that you may have, and I hope you have a great day. Again, thanks for watching my presentation. Take care.